Who on earth was Philip K. Dick, and why does it matter? He was that crazy guy that took all the drugs and wrote that Blade Runner book, wasn't he? Who cares what made him tick? As an unwritten rule, I like to separate the art from the artist. The background, the politics, the juicy gossip just doesn't hold that much currency with me. I'm far more interested in the words and the style, what they actually produced, rather than who they were. However, a couple of years ago, I started a reading project where I'll be reading all of Philip K. Dick's novels in a randomly selected order. I actually invented my own version of the I Ching, consisting of a load of ping pong balls and an old smelly golf shoe bag. I call it Dick Bag Bingo, obviously. I'm now about halfway through that project, and what I've discovered as I jump around the timeline of his writing career is that Dick's personality, his fluctuating state of mind, has sloshed over the side of his brain and left an imprint on the page. Of course, that will be the case for most of these authors, but there's something special, something extra peculiar about Dick's pseudo-fictional autobiographical style. I'm totally convinced that knowing more about the man himself will enhance this project for me, and now I've become totally obsessed with how the fragments of fiction and real life intersect and influence each other. So here is my little biopic of PKD. Join me if you want to unzip the enigma and expose more Dick. Just like your mum. Don't panic, I'm not going to bore you with a load of irrelevant details, but we do have to start off with a few fucked up factoids. Philip Kindred Dick. Kindred! I know, I was expecting something like Kevin or Kylie or Ketamine. Philip Ketamine Dick would have been more appropriate, but no, it's Kindred. No wonder he used a simple K. He was born 6 weeks prematurely in Chicago on December the 16th, 1928. Wow, that's almost 100 years ago. Now, he did have a twin sister, Jane Charlotte Dick, who was obviously born at the same time, but sadly, she died just a few weeks later. The details are a bit sketchy, but it wasn't that uncommon for premature babies to struggle back then. This was right at the start of the Great Depression, so poor health and poverty contributed to Jane's death. That's all very sad, but it gets worse. Well, it gets weird. Jane was buried in a twin grave. So for Philip's entire life, his only connection to his dead twin sister, whenever he went to pay his respects, there's his own headstone with his name already engraved on it, just waiting for him to die and join his sister one day. Whose idea was that? Now when you read his books, his many books about multiple personality syndrome, identity crisis, the phantom twin, mysterious young dark-haired girls, you understand that he's drawing from some really unresolved dark shit. The way I process this is, you know, they say you can look back over the life of a serial killer and pinpoint the specific moments that crystallize that personality, warp the identity. Well, in a similar way, I think Philip K. Dick had all of the triggers to become a surreal science fiction author. Okay, young Kindred is off to a great start, but I think we can just skim that stone over the pond of his early life. That's a metaphor. The family moved around a fair bit. They lived in Reno, Nevada, in DC, and eventually they settled in the San Francisco Bay Area. His parents divorced when he was 5 years old. Late 1940s now, he attends the University of California in Berkeley. He studies philosophy, history, and psychology. 1948, he gets married, but it only lasts a few months. I'm sure he'll get better at the old keeping hold of a wife thing. He'll be fine. So let's just set the scene. We have an intellectual young man living in the aftermath of World War II, the atomic age, in a corner of the world that is at the cutting edge of Western civilization. You can smell the cocktail of hope, rebellion, change and oblivion on the breeze. I wonder what he's going to write about. The 1950s were a relatively stable but still difficult time for Dick. I think he'd done his absolute best to conform. I think he wanted to live like a real person, whatever the hell that means. He got married again, so that's wife number 2. I like to call her his 50s wife. They were together from 1950 to 1959. Dick was now writing full time, and he did have some of his science fiction short stories published, but his full-length novels were mainly non-science fiction, and that seemed to be the career that he really wanted. Mary and the Giant, In Milton Lumpkey Territory, The Broken Bubble, all of those and more were rejected. In fact, the only non-SF novel that was published in his lifetime was Confessions of a Crap Artist in 1975. That all changed after the success of Blade Runner. Then publishers knew that they could sell pretty much anything with his name on it, and they were suddenly interested in this early part of his career. You know, from the author of Blade Runner, Humpty Dumpty in Oakland. But also during this time period, he wrote science fiction novels such as Vulcan's Hammer, Solar Lottery, Eye in the Sky, and the magnificent Time Out of Joint. There's a lot of end of the world stuff in there. He bloody loved the end of the world. Post-apocalyptic and dystopian, and sometimes both in the same book. It was very common to write about that sort of thing in the Cold War era, and that was a theme that he would return to time and time again throughout his career. And this is the whole point of the video. As well as writing a science fiction version of the world around him, he was suffering from anxiety and had a budding interest in different levels of consciousness, and these concepts were working their way into his stories. I think fate and circumstances are playing a big part now. If the world was ready for his mainstream stuff, or if he would have had just one breakout hit, I think Philip would have become just another interesting but ordinary writer. So praise the Lord for failure and drugs. Sometime during the 1950s, Philip got a taste for amphetamines, speed, uppers, bennies, that kind of thing. He would work all day long helping wife number 2 with her business. Then he would take a handful of pills and write all night, sometimes staying up for days on end and eventually crashing and repeat. Philip would later claim that everything he produced all the way up to A Scanner Darkly, that's about 20 years of writing, everything was written by a man who was absolutely off his tits. Let's take the 1960s and call it a period of productive madness. I'm not sure if he is actually clinically insane at this point, but he definitely gets darker and weirder. But for sure, he keeps his eye on the ball and remains prolific. This is the period where he produces most of the stone cold PKD classics. He was just getting warmed up. In 1961, he writes The Man in the High Castle. It wins the Hugo Award for Best Novel. It's not awarded until 1963, but still, he's on the map now. It's a book that kind of sums up everything that I've been talking about so far. The aftermath of a world war, identity, multi-dimensional existence. It should be the ramblings of a madman, but it's fucking amazing. Up to 1966, he was producing 4, 5, sometimes 6 novels a year, plus a load of short stories as well. Now, I know they're not chunky tomes, but that's some Barbara Cartland level of output. Martian Timeslip, Dr. Blood Money, Clans of the Alphane Moon, The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, and in 1966, Ubik and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Oh, okay. All the time, there's little doubt that we're tracking a man's personality through these books. more drugs, more weirdness. The themes of these stories become ever more conceptual and somewhat fragile, just like Dick. You can also feel that we haven't yet reached a tipping point or rock bottom, however these things are gauged. It's complicated, the drugs are still working. 10 years of hammering the brain produces maybe his best work. Yes, it's extremely weird, but also it's coherent in a messed up kind of way. But just like in Ubik, you can see that his reality is starting to melt. This isn't going to end well, is it? We also had wife number 3 and wife number 4 in this period. He tends to wear them out after about 5 years and then quickly move on to a new one. Check, check, check. Is that going to work? Shall I look at me or the camera? Okay. Hello, this video is sponsored by not us, you, the viewers, because we don't have any money and we need some of yours. You can help the channel by going to Buy Me a Coffee, which is like an online tipping service where you just throw us a few pennies. You can go to the merchandise store and buy Media Death Cult t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers. Do we have stickers? I'm pretty sure there are stickers on there, but it's all about the t-shirts. Only available in black because we're a bit metal. Or you can officially join the cult over at Patreon, which gives you exclusive access to our exclusive Discord, right? Where we talk about exclusive science fiction stuff. It's the best place on the internet in the world. And you also get access to the new podcast, exclusive access, Patreon only podcast, which is me walking around the woods talking about things like this. Better than this, miles better than this. We do appreciate any help. All the links are in the description down below, or you can take the moral low ground and carry on watching for free. What goes up must come down. In the early 1970s, it looked like Dick was done as a writer. He went from super prolific to big waves of writer's block, and his life started to unravel. Wife number 4 has moved on. Drug people and their entourage are sleeping on the couch. He's writing less and taking more pills, surrounding himself with more and more madness. It's season 5 of Breaking Bad. There was an incident in 1971 where his house was broken into, but he was suspected of actually staging the break-in. But it's far from clear because in his statement, he doesn't really admit to doing the break-in himself, but there does seem to be a finger pointed at an alternative version of himself, a fabricated reality around the incident where a different version of Philip K. Dick either done the break-in or was actually admitting to the other version of Philip doing the break-in or something. He did also suggest that the CIA broke into his house and now they were monitoring his brainwaves. Or was it the Black Panthers? Or was it a version of Philip K. Dick from the future? Whatever, he's definitely paranoid at this point, and he's starting to live this meta life where his science fiction work and his real life are starting to overlap, like many of the characters in his books. If all of this is starting to sound like the plot to A Scanner Darkly, that's because it is. A few years later, he writes that novel and he draws directly from the experiences in this part of his life. That's the book that inspired this video. To cut a long story short, it's very likely he got himself into a bit of drug money trouble with the wrong drug money people, and he fled to Vancouver for a while. Now he is the drug addict crasher of sofas, and surprise surprise, he falls in love, gets dumped, takes an overdose, tries to commit suicide, and at the last minute calls for help. That saves his life. Then he checks himself into rehab. The third act of A Scanner Darkly feels more like a memoir. That's why the last 50 pages of that book are so heartbreaking. It's quite different from the rest of his oeuvre. But finally, Dick gets clean. Dick gets clean. Without the drugs, I mean, was he ever completely clean? Let's just say that Flow My Tears, the policeman said, even though it was initially conceived when he was fucked up, Flow My Tears is what you get from a straight dick. Stop it. That is a brilliantly odd book and one of the best examples of the reading experience being enhanced if you have a glimpse of what was going on inside of his head while he was writing it. Was this chapter called This Is Getting Weird? Forget it. Now it's getting fucking weird. What the hell happened next? It's 1974 and it looks like Phil's living that typical after the drugs lifestyle. He's trying his best to be a normal family man, wife number 5, living in the suburbs, a new baby. And we think he's pretty sober, but he's always into some super vitamin, herbal new age shit. He has a wisdom tooth removed, so they give him the good shit. He then goes home and it looks like he had some sort of psychotic break. I think over 2 decades of hammering the inside of your skull will leave some emotional scar tissue down there in the depths, just lurking, waiting to rear its ugly head. A young female delivery driver knocks on the door. She has long dark hair. She's wearing a gold necklace that Dick claims emits a mesmerising pink laser beam that fires into his brain and triggers interdimensional time-travelling visions. This isn't his next book. Well, it is, sort of. I'm describing what Dick witnessed. This is the incident that will influence, dominate the rest of his life. The doppelganger of his dead future twin, the other half of his life force, is the conduit to a parallel universe that communicates to him through an entity called Valis. Vast, active, living, intelligent system. He may not be the precarious drug fiend anymore, but he does continue to act erratically. He's obsessed with this idea. He thinks it's real. Wife number 5 leaves. Everything he writes for the next 8 years, that's until the day he dies, is connected to this event. It may sound like the ramblings of a madman. It probably is. But I've read what is known as the Valis trilogy and Radio Free Albemuth, and I've got to say, it stands shoulder to shoulder with the best that he ever produced. He keeps a private journal about his knowledge, the fact that the CIA are using pink laser beams to control the population, extraterrestrials, an interdimensional link to ancient Rome and the Second Coming, the proof that we all live in a simulation. Oh yeah, this guy gets it. There's a particular fascinating, well, it's actually a little bit uncomfortable to be honest. He's at a conference in France in 1977 delivering this information to the public. He's laughed at, he's ridiculed, and by anyone's measure, he's a very troubled man. But the point is, he seems to be completely convinced that what he's experiencing is real. This may be the perfect opportunity to share my theory on what could be going on here. He may be the perfect method author, where he convinces everybody that he's going through these episodes and he's actually living this meta science fiction life where he becomes the story. But to be honest, what's more likely is that reality and his drug-soaked brain have morphed into one glorious dollop of dick, and he's somehow remained coherent. Or he was having a joke at our expense. Can I name drop? Is that okay? I was having a conversation with Tim Powers, the author. Tim was part of Phil's inner circle at the time of Valis. He's one of the characters in the book. He told me that Philip was constantly changing his belief system, flip-flopping his opinions and convictions, all with a cheeky grin behind his hand. So maybe the joke was on us. One thing's for sure, it definitely got really fucking weird. Right near the end of his life, Dick caught a glimpse of what could have been. Success finally caught up with him. Blade Runner was in production. Well, it was pretty much finished. And apparently Dick was very enthusiastic about the future of science fiction, and he did get to see some of the finished film. He finally made some money. The world was waking up to Dick. Just like your mum. And then he was gone. He died of a stroke in 1982. He's buried in that grave right next to his twin sister, 53 years after his name was carved on the tombstone. He left behind 5 ex-wives, 3 children, 44 novels, and 121 short stories. And of course, a legacy for idiots like me to poke around in and make silly videos about. Hopefully now you can see why I think it's important to have some context about the man himself. His books are awesome just the way they are, because even when they're a hot mess, and some of them are, they are a piece of his personal puzzle. You don't need any extra information, but just catching a glimpse of how those ideas found their way from his brain onto the page is a very powerful thing.